Good afternoon. I hope you all are enjoying your fabulous lunch this afternoon and that you had constructive workshops this morning and enjoyed the presentations that we had planned for you this morning. Right now, I'd like to introduce our luncheon speaker. Professor Jorge Huete Perez is the Senior Vice President of the University of Central America in Managua, Nicaragua. An advocate for improving science education and the appropriate use of biotechnology for development, he was the founding president of the Nicaraguan Academy of Sciences and founder of the Molecular Biology Center at the University of Central America, where he served as its director for 15 years. A recipient of numerous awards, Jorge's work covers a broad spectrum focusing on molecular and genomic aspects of unicellular parasites, forensic DNA typing, and bioprospecting for industrial enzymes. Jorge received his PhD in biochemistry, molecular biology, through a joint program at the University of Sao Paulo School of Medicine in Brazil and the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine. He was also a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard University and a research fellow at the Sandler Molecular Parasitology Center at UC San Francisco. Today, Dr. Huete Perez is going to share with us information related to a transoceanic canal that's being planned in Nicaragua. I think it's news to a lot of us. And one of the reasons he's here today is he would like to have input from us on this topic. And so I encourage you to be thinking of your questions so that you can ask those after his presentation. So please help me welcome Dr. Jorge Huete Perez.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to your comments. Sometimes our best ideas can become the worst nightmare. And in the case of Nicaragua, people have always thought that the dream of a canal would be the solution to our poverty and to all our problems. And apparently people have been dreaming to build this interoceanic canal that would join the Caribbean Ocean with the Pacific Ocean through Lake Nicaragua. And this has been rather the dream of so many powers, like England, the US, France, many other powers in the world. I personally have never dreamed about a canal, and I consider myself a Nicaraguan. So this was taken, it's a picture of San Francisco Examiner promoting the development of this canal for the US in spite of already having a Panama Canal in the 30s. And this was thought of as of relevance to the US defense. So every time there's a problem in Nicaragua, presidents or politicians bring up the idea of a canal and how this can make us rich to all of us. So this is the plan, in simple terms, the planned canal through Nicaragua. Just about a year ago, in June of 2013, the Nicaraguan government gave the concession to a Chinese company, a company that nobody knows, and it was created like 5 months before giving the concession in the Cayman Islands. And it's supposed to be an enterprise of 50, sometimes they say 40, sometimes $50 billion. And the canal is supposed to compete with the Panama Canal. Here's a simple comparison. So to be able to compete with the Panama Canal, this would allow for ships that would be rather much larger tankers that would mostly transport oil in the destination of China and the US. So, Ours will have to be much larger. It will have to be deeper. So the idea is to have at least 30 meters deep in the water, and it would have to be about 500 meters wide. And for this, they would go from the Caribbean, cross the lake, which is the main reservoir of water for Central America, and then, here you just have like 15 miles to cross land to the Pacific. So it all sounds great, except that all this area is an area of our main Central American rainforest. And the lake is the main reservoir of water, not just for now, for the future. Currently, people already are drinking this water, the communities that are around the lake. But it's been considered that the lake is actually the source of water for the future, especially considering climate change. And Nicaragua is, together with Honduras, some of the countries that are hit the most with climate change in Central America. Currently, we have the worst drought in years. We don't have a drop of water, because of the lack of rain, and people are recurring to using the lake. And obviously, a huge canal that would go through the lake and would use this water would definitely be contaminating. So this is the current situation. I would like to bring the case here to this audience and suggest that this canal idea is a case where we are ignoring the environmental justice concerns, and in particular, that it fails to ensure the natural environment for ethnic communities, but in general for the whole population of Nicaragua, because it violates the rights, the constitutional rights, and also because of the lack of transparency and participation in the decision-making process. While doing this, the proponents of the canal are denying the rights of all the people of Nicaragua to their land and to their way of lives. So let me tell you a little bit more description about this project. The process was absolutely questionable. The law was approved like in 2 days of discussion, approved mostly by the majority of the government parliamentaries, and they ignored the law that says that we need to have an impact assessment before any concessions. So they absolutely ignored it and decided to go ahead with approving a special law for the concession. Of course, the opponents immediately expressed that, number one, the project might not be financially feasible. It's a very large area that they have to cross. It's 3 times the length of the Panama Canal. So there are also concerns about displacing numerous indigenous groups that live in that area that is actually all forest and mangroves. And it will definitely damage the environment. They would have to cut through the forest to get to the lake and then to cross the lake to the Pacific. So there are serious concerns, and the route was only announced about 3-4 weeks ago in July. So all that year, Nicaragua was open for this Chinese concession so that they could do the canal anywhere in the world, anywhere in Nicaragua. They could do it in the north, they could go through the lake or not, they could do it in the south next to Costa Rica, anywhere. And even now, the concession law was given to them that they can take any place in the whole country for the purpose of the canal. They can say, well, in the north, I need an office for the canal. And they take your land. This is the way that the law is. And you should read this law. It's about 8 pages. And for those people that like those cases, this is incredible. This is the first time that this law was published both in Spanish and English. And they're supposed to start this December. So, one of the first things that environmental groups and scientists were saying is, if you need to do environmental impact assessment after the fact, because before they didn't do it, and they said that all these environmental impact assessments are going to be done by the company. Don't worry, it's going to be done by the company. So, they would need time for that. And it seems like they want to do those studies like in 3 months. And when we complain, what they said, oh, we have the best technology, radars, satellites and everything. So, we're really doubtful that there are serious studies that we can look at if we were ever to look at them. Because, when we ask for the studies, the environmental impact assessment, the feasibility studies, economic studies, they said that it's confidentiality, that they can't show it to the public. So, they're supposed to start this December. The scientific community has gathered together and, suggest to the governments that there needs to be an independent assessment study, that somebody needs to defend the state of Nicaragua. The company, there's a conflict of interest. If they do their studies, they're not going to find any problems. They're not going to find any problems in cutting the forest or damaging the lake. And by the way, in the law, it says that any damage that they can do is the state that needs to pay, not the company. So the project, threatens all those areas, both inland and in the oceans. Nicaragua had a long-term dispute with Colombia regarding the Caribbean Sea. It was finally assigned to Nicaragua about a year ago. And this is the most pristine ocean, area of the ocean in the Caribbean that was given to Nicaragua. And this is exactly where all the tankers are going to go through. This is where the best corals are in the Caribbean. So, right. So, the Lake Cocibolca, we have focused, that's the indigenous name of Lake Nicaragua. All the adjacent waters and rivers that are, together with the lake will be taken for the purpose of the canal. And this is the best area where you find the most biodiversity in the country and in Central America. So this is currently the lake. It's very peaceful, beautiful nature there. We Nicaraguans say that we have a land of water and volcanoes. So this is a good representation. These are our current boats. This is the largest boats. And this is what they want to use to go through the lake. It's even from the point of view of engineering and hydraulics, it's a very serious enterprise because they will have to dig really deep. They don't even know what is under the lake, but we know that it's hard rock. So they're saying, oh, we'll just use dynamite. And by the way, we'll bring a company that would, produce dynamite in Nicaragua. You never had that before. So that's a bonus that we get. So, continuing with the environmental concerns, I'm not going to go deep into this, but I just want to mention a few. There's a characteristic aquatic fauna in the lake. It's a very, important, different ecosystem in the lake. We have species, and researchers have investigated the evolution of those species because being a lake separated from other sources of water is a natural laboratory to study evolution. So it will be a devastating impact on all the region's ecology. And in terms of biodiversity, of course, by cutting all that land, dividing Nicaragua into two Nicaraguas, Nicaragua North, Nicaragua South, we will definitely disrupt the migration of all these species in there. And in response, they say, but most mammals swim. It's not really a problem. They can swim 500 meters. They say it like that. It's serious. They have hired some environmentalists also to present a good face for the project. And they're calling the project an eco project at the UN. So, and we have to remember too, that in this concession, we have mostly focused in the canal, but really the concession is a combo. There's really 8 projects, and all of them are really large projects. Some of those are, for example, oil pipelines to go through Nicaragua. They're supposed to build, a few airports, industrial zones, etc. So it's really every one of these, you would need an environmental impact assessment, which is not being done. So I talk about the biodiversity. There are some specific species that are protected and they're threatened. They're endangered species. And definitely there will be an irreversible damage and soil erosion and drastic changes to land use. And as we know, people will have to be displaced. It's more than 300 communities that will have to be displaced and move up somewhere, probably to a different natural reserve, and people will start cutting the trees in those national reserves as well in the north. So this will, create a mess in terms of land use. These are some of the species that are protected and that, their environment will be disrupted. The panther over there is a very, protected area which is relevant to all the cultures in Mesoamerica. And of course, the damage would be inland and in the water. There's social aspects that needs to be considered. And there's at least 270 villages that will be affected. But we know that because the canal goes beyond the construction of the canal, it goes 10 kilometers north and 10 kilometers south, there will be more communities affected as well. So, and most of the time, you will find that all these communities are economically vulnerable. So these are serious issues for indigenous groups that live in that area. And as we know, they're deeply attached culturally to their land and to their ancestral lands. We need to consider that Nicaragua, being a multi-ethnic country, has gone through very serious and long history of wars. This area actually that is being affected, was in an uprising against the revolution in the 80s, specifically because their land was being taken. So that was pacified, I don't know if that word exists, peace, in 1990, but we are being threatened at this time because we're going to, again, take the land of these communities that are autonomous, and they have their own constitution, and they are respected in the Nicaraguan constitution, and they decided to ignore all of this for the good of the country. So ethnic communities in particular presented lawsuits. Of course, they were all rejected and denied. And I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing and then go further to trying to hear what you have to say about this. So there were 32 legal challenges. This is the largest number ever for any law in Nicaragua. And there's a growing coalition of environmental groups, scientists, universities. The Nicaraguan Academy of Sciences that I had the honor of representing during this time has called for an independent study, and we have been calling the international scientific community also to give us a hand in understanding all the possible problems that may bring the canal. And definitely we need to start an independent environmental impact study because we cannot trust the studies that the company is going to provide and which will be immediately approved by the Nicaraguan government. So, and we can also start proposing other ideas of economic development for Nicaragua because the way the government has presented this idea is like this is a huge development project that is going to get Nicaragua out of poverty. So, maybe we need to have other alternatives. Why do we have only one alternative to get us out of poverty? And we are demanding a public debate and transparency. They are denying any transparency and any public debate, although it's obligated by law. We have published a couple of scientific papers. This one is in Nature, where we were warning the world about this. We think that it was very important to publish this paper because many people have paid attention, especially scientists. It also shows the natural reserves that will be affected. Shows the wetlands and these 3 reserves that are directly affected by this construction of the canal. Initially, there were 6 different routes being considered, and this is the final one that they decided. They didn't explain why this and not the others. So this is some of the things that we have been doing. And of course, there are also geopolitical questions, that go beyond the science and it gets us into politics. I'm not an expert in this, but many people, and not only in Nicaragua but abroad, are saying that really we don't know who's funding this project, and they said it's confidential. So many people are speculating that this is really the government of China, Popular Republic of China, involved in this. And of course, when you put it that way, it kind of makes sense, because getting $50 billion for a project like this, that it might even go further, because people are saying 50 is very conservative, might be even 60 or even 80. So, for China, $50 billion is nothing. And if you're given that piece of land, 20 kilometers all along, 300 kilometers length, for 100 years, that's the concession, it might be a good deal for China in terms of politics. And of course, this is our President Ortega. You might know him when he was younger, and he used to be a revolutionary, and now he's a businessman dealing with Wang Jing. This is the concessionary, and he calls him the big brother, Chinese brother. And this is the son. So this project is being handled by Ortega's son. So this is a matter of a family, and apparently, they have a big interest in building this canal. So all this geopolitics and nepotism in the country, those are questions that we are also supposed to be considering. It's not just the sciences and the environmental issues. So what are the perspectives? Many people ask, is it really happening? Will it happen? It's been 1 year. We haven't heard anything about that because, there's no transparency there. They passed the law and that's it. And now in December, they're going to start building. And I would like to suggest, that in terms of environmental justice, the next generation of Nicaraguans, because this is going to go for 100 years, are the people that are going to be challenged, in their way of life, food, water, shelter, environmental health. And I think that the deeper question is also in terms of development, the paradigm of development. We're being led to believe, that only these huge, colossal projects are the ones that can get us out of poverty. So, we would like to propose that that's not the only way to get people out of poverty. And that, as a matter of fact, that might be getting us into being even worse when you consider, the environmental justice questions. So, we are becoming byproducts of the economic ambitions of some people. These people are very simple people. They're not people that have a voice. We need to empower those communities. What are they going to do against the state, against huge company, against, interest for more than billions of dollars? It's very hard to do this work. And in Nicaragua, we have exhausted all the possibilities. We went through the legal challenges. They all denied all the challenges, 32 challenges. So there are battles, that we have to confront over environmental degradation, land rights, food security, as a matter of fact, water security because of the lake. And we need to mobilize communities, but it's not just the communities, the ethnic communities, but the whole population, and even beyond Nicaragua. We are afraid that this will create more cultural disintegration in the country. And we have hope. We think that by working together with the international community, with people that do have the possibility to make big changes, we can improve it and that we can get out of this situation. Thank you.
So Jorge, I think I'm going to get us started on questions, and we'll walk around with the microphone. So our media here in the U.S. distracts us with things like Hollywood gossip and the National Football League. Could you tell us what the U.S. government's position is on this canal?
There's no position. I had the chance to speak with the number 2 in the embassy of the US in Nicaragua in a social gathering because of the 4th of July. And I asked him this question, so what does the US have to say about this? And his answer was, well, you know, it would have been better if you had used the San Juan River as well, because, you know, that would be easier to do in terms of engineering. I haven't heard any official position from the US. I did hear that the Department of Commerce seemed to be interested because, you know, for the US, if it's cheaper and there's competition with the Panama Canal, it might be actually cheaper for the boats. So, but nothing official.
Just a quick question. You ended your presentation with a call for international help. What specifically what can we do here?
Right. Well, I'm a scientist, and I have been leading the Academy of Sciences until last April. We had my term ended. Now there's another vice president, and I am vice president currently. And one thing we want to do is to do things right. You know, there always needs to be environmental impact assessment for any project. So we want to have an independent impact assessment to tell the truth about all of this. Because, you know, they don't even give you permits to go in the water and check what the biodiversity there is. So, you know, we want to do that. And that's number one. We have actually convinced the World Academies of Sciences to support us in doing this. And the plan is to bring scientists from all over the world, you know, to discuss these issues. Now, I am aware that the science is not going to change this situation. And I think that probably we would have better luck with the international environmental community, which are normally strong. But I'm afraid to say that this question is off the radar of the world big international environmental community. I have written letters to most of the big ones. I don't even get response. Some people say, yeah, sounds interesting. That's it. But I am hopeful, because I think that as things develop and as people start looking at this problem more seriously, more people would be interested in having a saying and defending. You know, in Nicaragua, there's not much we can do. I mean, we have exhausted all the legal possibilities. And beyond legal, you know, you get in jail. And you know, Nicaragua is very easy to get into unrest. We need to protect the peace in the country. So we need to go careful about this. We don't want to end up in wars again, but we do need to defend the rights of the people there. I would like to hear from you what you have to suggest.
I have a thought. Have you approached the UN or maybe The Hague?
Yeah, so the environmental group, there's a growing coalition, and what they're doing, I think next week or the week after, they're bringing a complaint to the Inter-American Committees of Human Rights. I don't know what the power of that organization is, but I am told that it's mostly, you know, to make people aware of the situation and make the government listen. You know, what we are saying is at least you need to have debates, you need to have, you know, follow the rules and the regulations, which is we need environmental impact assessment to discuss this. We're not even saying stop the canal, you know, it's not a good idea. We're saying, you know, if you're going to do this, you need to do it properly. And you can't go over the rights of the peoples in those regions or in the whole country, because, you know, they can take any place in the whole country.
Carlos Fernando Chamorro had a piece in El País a couple of days ago where he raised a geopolitical point that I think is kind of important. I'm curious what you think about it. He pointed out that Wang Jing and HKND initially presented the project as an international consortium that would have capital and expertise from many different countries. But since then, whenever he's asked about who are the actual participants, he's been very secretive, and there's no indication that there's anyone from outside of China actually that's going to be involved in building it, which would mean it would be a canal done and owned totally by China and corresponding to the interests of their government. So what do you think of that?
Yes, that seems to be true. You know, it's very hard to tell because we're not told anything. I mean, they approve the concession, and then you see a few Chinese going around here and there. There's nothing, and you know, some information leaks, so you learn some things, and then it turns out to be true. And they also give fragmented information, like when you go and you manage to ask one question, then they tell you something, and that's news. You know, for example, they're gonna use dynamite in the lake. We didn't know that, you know, but someone said, how are you gonna dig in the lake? Oh, by the way, we'll use dynamite. You know, so that's the way it is. Now, I remember that moment when Carlos Fernando, a very brave journalist, asked that question directly to Wang Jing, who was in Nicaragua there, to celebrate an anniversary of the revolution. And, you know, the answer was, because of confidentiality, we cannot tell you. But everybody thinks that it's really the government of China. We don't know. Yeah.
Thank you. Great presentation. A lot of us here have worked with keeping coal trains, keeping a terminal from being built to ship coal to China, because it would impact incredibly the health of children and traffic, et cetera, and the waters of the Salish Sea. And the governor, I think, has agreed to look at all of the impacts, which would include burning coal in China and what that does for the overall environment. And it seems to me this canal is all about oil to China. And it seems like there's a big demonstration in New York City on September 21st about the environment, and someone needs to have a contingent about this canal, because it's all about bringing oil and probably coal to China, and liquefied natural gas, which the US wants to build lots of terminals. I'm sure the US is involved in this in some way, or oil companies are anyway. So I think to reach out to environmental groups like 350, who has a big campaign about not using all that oil and coal that's in the ground, it needs to be connected to this canal, because that's what they're doing. And also, somehow, they ought to be able to make use of the paranoia, the jingoism of the US towards China, to keep that canal from being in Central America. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. What you've described is pretty appalling, and I just have a few questions to see what your prognosis is for success to fight this. First question is, where does the public opinion stand on this? Is it 60% for, or what? And then I'm really curious as to why your legal system failed. In many parts of the world, the legal system can really cause administration problems. Is it because it's corrupt? Because you clearly have laws that require EIAs, and they're being flouted. And I imagine there's numerous laws, including international laws with Ramsar and other treaties for wetlands, et cetera. As you say, you've made 32 legal interventions. How could they all fail? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you look at it from the US point of view, if you know the situation in Nicaragua, then you see that it makes sense. And I don't want to say anything that would get me into jail as soon as I arrive, but I will say it's a very authoritarian government. They have all the power. They have their people in every power. There's no independent powers, you know, like Supreme Court, Parliament, or the other powers, electoral system. They have their people, So, things just flow in their interest. So when these things were brought to court, they got all the 32 together and they said, no, this is wrong. Just like that, before going to Christmas vacation. And that's how it works. So, the reality is you can't protest either. You go out to the streets, you have 10 students, oh, environmental protection, then suddenly they send mobs, 300, 400 people with pals and machetes, and they beat the hell out of you. And you don't go out anymore, after that experience. There's no opposition on the streets. So what is the position of the people? It's very hard to tell. There are no polls yet showing what they think. But I do have to tell you, being a very poor country, and most of the people, with not much education and not much future, some people want to believe that maybe this whole thing about the canal taking us out of poverty and making us wealthy from one day to another, they would want to believe that that is true. And the government is playing that game really well. They go around making lists. Who wants to work in the canal? Oh, you want to work. Okay, your name. And everybody knows that's fake because the Chinese, they bring their own people. And you're going to need, if this were to happen, you're going to need really very skillful engineers, which we don't have. Nobody knows how to build a canal in Nicaragua. So, that's not even true. And then after building the canal, running the canal, we were talking to people from Panama, and they were saying, only 3% of the population in Panama is working for the canal. So how are you going to make people rich if you only employ 3% with one large project like that? And people think that you're going to be able to stand at the light like people do now, and they sell you anything at the stoplight. Those boats are going to go through. They're not going to stop to buy anything at the stoplight. There will be more business. And the Panamanian economy is not because of the canal. The Panamanian economy has other things. And of course, now the canal belongs to them. But for 100 years, the canal would be a Chinese canal, not a Nicaraguan canal. That's the way the concession is, 100 years, just like the Panama Canal.
Well, it's 1:15 actually, so I think we need to. What's that? Oh, it goes to 1:30. Oh, sweet. Sorry, guys, I didn't look at my own schedule. So right here, and then we'll come over here.
Thank you so much for your presentation today. It's been incredibly informative. I guess what I'm wondering, with international influence, what would neighboring countries like Costa Rica or Honduras are they saying about it? Obviously, looking at the map, it doesn't look like it impacts Rio San Carlos, so it's not necessarily going to impact Costa Rica, but in as much of it being a freshwater resource and other countries are looking to Nicaragua for that in the future with climate change, they would have probably an investment of how Cocibolca is managed. And then I would also wonder too, and this may not be relevant, but the International Development Bank, what is their opinion on this? Would they then withhold funding from Nicaragua, saying you've got your canal, you've got your funding for that, we're not involved? Or what are other, I would think, regional agencies or consortiums like that saying?
Right. Well, that's a good point. Regarding the banks, we know that there are regulations, for lending money. So the World Bank has regulations in terms of the environment, and you wouldn't lend money to projects that are not environmentally sustainable. And that's a good point, but we don't know who's lending money and who's getting money because it's all confidential. Even in China, I believe a couple of years ago, the Chinese are also implementing, similar practices where they want lending institutions like Chinese banks to also follow environmental procedures and stuff like that. So, some people are saying, in all that speculation about China, some people are saying that it's the military in China that is funding the project. And I don't think they would need any lending, from the banks. But that's a good point, and we are addressing those issues as it's not really me, it's the coalition of people paying attention and writing letters and trying to communicate with banks in China and also the World Bank and all of that. But the World Bank also is a system that plays the game. I'm really amazed to see very often all those international organizations that see what's happening in Nicaragua and they go along with it. The UN, the OEA, they went to Nicaragua and they think everything is moving along well.
Three related questions. First of all, thank you very much for coming. Maybe you could explain a little bit the domestic political situation. Maybe some of us, the last time we really thought about what was going on was when the Contras were still active. Next question would be, is Costa Rica, you asked about alternative models, has Costa Rica been able to at all explain how its emphasis on preservation has led to its development? Are they persuasive? And finally, the church. Is there any role, given I think the conservative predilections of the church historically, do they have any pull or pressure with the not Sandinistas, with the Ortega family really? So I guess internal domestic political situation, are there any alternative bases of political power? Costa Rica as a model? Right. And finally, the role of the church, would the Pope have any pull? Since we're the Jesuit institution.
Yeah, this is like one big lecture. But I'll go just briefly, and I'm afraid, I would simplify everything, but I'll try. So, many people in the US, and probably this community, was very sympathetic with the Sandinista revolution in the 80s. I was part of that revolution in the 80s. And I wouldn't be surprised that most of the people think that this is like the second phase of the Nicaraguan revolution from the 80s, especially because you have the same guy in power, right? Not true, not at all. It's a different man, it's a different process. I would say that there's not even a party, Sandinista party, because the way this is going is like there's one family, the Ortega family, that has taken power. They destroyed the Sandinista party, they created their own party, and they have a different ideology. They even have a different church, They are building their own church in his image. This is very complicated from the psychological and sociological point of view, very hard to explain in 1 minute, but you would have to see it. It's very weird. I mean, I'll give you just an example. Every time Ortega comes to give his speech, if you can call that a speech, he starts with God, I've been thinking of God, and what he wants is for us to do the canal. Yeah. And when people ask me about the environment and everything, all that thing, well, God wants us to do it. If God wants us to do it, it's a good deed. These kind of things. And so they're building their own church, and the bishop would be his wife. His wife actually is the one that comes every day at noon, and she gives a speech about how God wants this process. Whatever is happening in the moment, we had earthquakes, well, there's an explanation. God is saying, follow the instructions that President Ortega is saying. Be careful, okay? So it's very difficult. If we want to see something positive for the past 40 years, we don't have war now, and we try to solve our problems democratically, right? I mean, the electoral system doesn't work, the first thing he did in his first 6 months of coming back to power was to change the law that said that you cannot run more than twice as president. So he changed that, and now he can run as many times as he wants. That tells you where he's going, and that's the first thing he changes. We said that this was unconstitutional. Everything they did with the canal is unconstitutional. They didn't respect, there was no debate, They don't respect communities. They don't respect autonomy communities. It's all unconstitutional. Well, what they did was they changed the Constitution. And now in the Constitution, you can build a canal, okay? So that's the situation, you know, and the opposition is not that the opposition is better either. So, you know, that's a serious problem. So that's what's going on there. But we have peace, you know, and we need to solve this peacefully. I do hear some people that belong to other, you know, political affiliations starting to worry and saying, you know, the only way we can get out of this is with war, because look, you cannot come to power with elections. So they're leading us to that. They have the army, they have the police. You know, just recently there was a terrorist act in Nicaragua, which is not frequent in Nicaragua. You know, after a celebration of an anniversary of the revolution, some people attacked a couple of buses filled of people, you know, shooting at those buses, killing 4 people and then other wounded. And it turns out that the people that they have captured are from the same party. So within the party, you know, are differences. So it's a shame, you know, that we got out of that. The economy was growing, you know, steadily, 5%, and now we get into this, you know, out of control situation. Costa Rica, you know, we're brothers. As a matter of fact, you know, 30% of Costa Ricans are really Nicaraguan that have migrated to Costa Rica. And you know, they have been very smart in 2 things at least. One, investing in education steadily for more than 50 years. And the other thing that they have done really well is that while we were at war, they have been always at peace. And they have been very conscious about the environment. You know, their business with eco-tourism, everything is eco, it works, you know. And I thought that Nicaragua was also heading into that direction, but somehow with this canal thing, you know, we can see that the idea of development is very different. So they have complained about the canal, and what they said was very diplomatically, they said, we would like to look at the studies to really verify that it's not going to affect us in Costa Rica. And of course, you know, because we have always border problems, Nicaragua denied and said, we're not going to give you anything. You know, this is our sovereignty. So the Costa Ricans are quiet, you know, as long as it doesn't affect them. And that's why the canal proponents decided not to go through the San Juan River, which is the border, natural border with Costa Rica. It would have been easier to go there, apparently. You know, without thinking about the environment or damage, but in terms of the engineering, it seems like it would have been easier to do that. But they, of course, they know that they would get into international problems with Costa Rica, and then they wouldn't do the canal. So they decided to go somewhere else, go through the forest. The church is a very interesting question, because the church is very well respected in Nicaragua. You know, Nicaragua is a Catholic, Christian country, mostly Catholic, but Christian in general. So the church, you know, has good respect, and they are really outspoken and very firm. And they have said things, you know, about this kind of environmental justice things. You need to respect communities. You need to do studies. Pretty much, you know, what I underline here in those lines. But also, you know, they're not going to stop the government from doing that. But they are well respected and listening. And at this point, because the opposition is so fragmented and has no popularity at all, I think the church is the only one that people are listening to as an institution. Yeah.
In regards to the following up on the UN strategy, have you all looked into utilizing the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples that was passed in 2007? That's my question.
Yes, I believe that was done about 2 months ago. I don't know where it stands, but I know that they've done it. and they brought the case to that declaration. I think it's pending or something. Yeah, in general, I like to think that we in Nicaragua are the people that should solve this problem and not let the problem be solved by someone else. But there's a point where there's not much you can do in the country. And one would like to believe that, the international community would make sense of this. Nowadays, really all the environmental problems are not Nicaraguan problems. This is really humanity's problems. And all those problems, I have been talking to experts, all the damage that they're gonna do by building those ports, bombing the lake, all those problems are gonna affect at least the neighboring countries, but if this is an enterprise that would be for the international commerce, I would think that everybody should be interested as well, and that should be making sure that this is done properly if it were to be done. I don't see how it can be done properly when you damage your natural resources, but, All right. Well, thank you.
Okay. Well, how about a big hand for Dr. Huete Perez? Thank you so much. Thank you. You bet. Certainly, if you have more questions, I invite you to talk to Jorge at our 3:30 reception today. So